Barbara Carter. I was born in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. I am a visual artist and a writer of memoir mainly, and a mother and grandmother. I create images, and I started out in fabric, and then I moved into mixed media for currently I use mixed media, which can be anything from working on wood to canvas to wood burning to fabric to paint. Use all kinds of things to create a visual image that will mainly hang on the wall. I definitely create for both. I started showing my work back in the late 80s and selling and showing in galleries. And then I kind of came into a period of time where I also created more for myself. It's very much about myself a lot of the times, and then other people connect to the images that I make. I started, there came a time when my images, when I started out as an artist, I felt I had nothing to say. As a person especially, I was very shy. And isolated in connection to other creative people. They just weren't in my life. And there came a point after about 15, 20 years that I suddenly found I had a voice and a lot to say. And that's when I discovered I needed to write. Personal life experiences, struggles, difficulties that I've gone through. I've had an unusual childhood. Not a loving, caring, easy going environment that I grew up with. Through my teens, I struggled with depression, anxiety, which led to abusing drugs as a way of coping. Each book focuses on a different period in life. My first book focuses on childhood and those experiences that shaped me and my thoughts about the people around me and what I believed in. I came to believe that it was very much about that inner voice, and could I trust that inner voice over what I was being told by adults? Because that inner voice didn't agree with what I was seeing around me and what I was told to believe or told to do. I believe through my artwork, the images were very much revealing parts of myself that I didn't know it was revealing. And as I was showing my work, I would sometimes be in a show and a psychologist or somebody else who knew a little bit more along those lines would say, do you know what your work is saying? Do you know what that image is portraying? And I had to kind of make a deal with myself that I had to be willing to expose vulnerable parts if I wanted to continue what I was doing, because that was where that inner voice and heart was leading me with those images, even though they were scary. So I learned so much about myself through my art. I discovered, I started out as a child with coloring books, and coloring was a way of escaping everything around me. And then around the age of 10 or 11, I learned that I could draw. And there was no art taught in the schools, so nobody was there to instruct me on how to. I just somehow kind of stumbled on, wow, I can make something look like something else. And so that provided me with almost a meditation, in a sense, that I could focus on that activity. And then later in my teens, I wrote poetry. It was a way of letting my emotions out. All these things were things like the coloring, and that connection to image was there as a young child. And so more and more I find how everything in your life now, especially trusting that inner voice, was there way back when. So it's finding those little things that you loved as a child. I loved reading and books and finding knowledge there. So it's kind of going back to the things that bring you joy and happiness and peace. And they're not big, expensive, complicated things. I have four. The fourth one was kind of accidental. It came from the third one. I had saved a bit of my teenage poetry. And through the third book, I discovered, because we all have inner voices. I just finished reading The Artist's Way, and she talks about the secret selves. And I had worked before in therapy with sub-personalities, and so those different voices within. And I discovered sad girl and bad girl in my late teens. It was there even as a young child, more so as angry and kind of the little girl, the one that had all the feelings that had to kind of shut them off. Um, so I had those poems, and how it kind of comes into play is sad girl was so sad she just wanted to die. She didn't know how to deal with life or feelings. Bad girl was very much the rebel and the angry and the power. And she could go out and do things and suppress that sad part and pretend life was fine. And so I, as an adult, printed off my poems that I still had left and put them on cream colored linen paper. And then I just free associated female images around those words. And so it's called Sad Girl, Bad Girl, and I. And it's the combination of all three of us coming together and my adult self loving those former parts of myself that nobody was there for at the time. People can really connect to those feelings and those parts of themselves. And I think it's important to accept those parts as an adult, because I feel very strongly about what leads us to addiction and things that aren't good for us in the end, that, you know, we think help us, make us feel good, but in the end really start to destroy us. And it all comes from suppressing those feelings and those parts of ourselves. So it's finding a way to accept them and love them and realize we were doing the best we could at the time with what we had. I don't know, they kind of grew up with me just creating things and doing things. And so I don't know sometimes if it kind of shied them away from being creative in their own sense, or I don't know, it's hard. I guess it's just the way their mother's always been. Yeah. I often think of that. I work with I like using older, especially medieval images in my art, doing copies of old artwork and then collaging them in with mine. And it's kind of that feeling of people who created those at that time would have no idea of another artist hundreds of years later being connected to that image, using it in their work. And yeah, we have no idea how we affect or connect. And I write about some of that. I'm learning more and what I'm leaning towards more is writing personal essays and sharing, not just in my book, but little segments of reading about writings about stuff like that, on how, you know, one simple gift, one therapist gave me a book one time and I still have it, and the impact of that extra step of her caring, what a difference it made. I plan to be on Word of the Street this fall, and I go to various little markets, also at Art 1274 on Hollis Street in Halifax. My artwork is there, and also my books are available for sale there. For me, like creativity, it's kind of, I guess, my grounding. If I don't have a bit of that every day in my life, I feel unsettled. So with visiting with family, I've been on the go for 4 days, and it's like, oh, I can't wait to sit down, get alone, and just, you know, have that almost meditative alone time. And that allows me then more energy and more connection than to be with people when I am. So it's kind of finding that balance in your life of what works for you, and I guess nourishes, gives you that nourishment.